Coming up today on The Story.
Well, at 18 years of age in Barbados, I was invited to a crusade with visiting speakers, and I made a decision for Christ. And for those first 4 years, I was full on for God, seeking the will of God for my life. And I sought to give definition to that by going to a school of evangelism in Europe. But I was exposed to stuff that put my head in a lot of confusion. And really, Christianity became a legalistic bondage.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, Mike Kinch was born in Barbados in the Caribbean and migrated to Australia in the 1970s. When he was a young man, he was on fire for the Lord and went to Bible school in Europe. But sadly, he was so put off by the legalism he discovered there that he walked away from his faith for 20 years. Today, Mike will share his life journey and how, after several years in the wilderness, so to speak, he's returned to the Lord and he's now full on in his faith and doing marvellous ministry work. Mike Kinch is chatting with Karen Hunt.
Mike, tell me, what was it like for you growing up in Barbados on a different continent to where you are now?
Well, Barbados, Karen, is a very, very beautiful island. It's the most easterly of the Caribbean islands, and it's a very laid-back lifestyle, very easygoing lifestyle. We enjoyed a beautiful climate. There's no such thing as seasons. So we had a lovely tropical climate all year round, and most of my first 25 years were spent in Barbados, but also because my dad worked in other islands. I lived in Trinidad, I lived in Jamaica, and also in my early 20s, I then got to about 14 countries in Europe. So growing up in Barbados was very, very colorful, and a lot of fond memories over those years.
What did your family look like, Mike? Brothers, sisters, mum, dad?
Well, there's mum and dad, and there is one brother. My dad was a very successful businessman in the airlines and also in the advertising industry.
Mm-hmm. And your mum?
My mum, she was a stay-at-home mum.
God bless
her. And as my dad said recently, like in the 25 years, from 35 to 60 when he was in the advertising industry, she was his hospitality lady.
Nice.
So his clients were not entertained, so to speak, at hotels. Mum would prepare beautiful meals, and Dad would bring his clients home and enjoy beautiful meals, and then he was into yachting in the beautiful Caribbean waters, so he would take them yachting.
Wow.
So a lot of his international clients enjoyed coming down to Barbados and having good times with him. Needless to say, I also enjoyed the yachting immensely on the west coast of the island. And my one brother and I, we went to a school in the country. Mm-hmm. I went to the boarding establishment for many years also because of his traveling. And my big love growing up was cricket, because as you know, the West Indies are very good cricketers. Uh-huh. And I had the distinction of playing for my school in the equivalent of Pennant Grade 1 cricket as a young fellow.
Congratulations.
So a lot of fond memories, Karen.
Yeah. Tell me, was faith a part of those early years or not really?
Yeah, Karen, in those first 22 years of my life, the first 18 years, faith was like in the background, just like conventional, what I grew up with within the context of the Church of England, not to be offensive to anyone. But then between 18 and 22, I had an incredible Christian experience where I was full on in evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal faith. Had a powerful experience in God, which led me at about age 21 going to Europe to a school of evangelism for a few months down to the Holy Land, Christian outreach. And then after I returned back, because of troubles I had with understanding a lot of aspects of the Christian faith, I became agnostic for 20 years.
Tell us about that experience, first of all. What was it that happened and where were you specifically?
Well, at 18 years of age in Barbados, I was invited to a crusade with visiting speakers, and I made a decision for Christ, which we know today means repentance from wrongdoing and faith in his finished work on the cross. And for those first 4 years, I was full on for God, seeking the will of God for my life, endeavoring to answer what I conceived to be the call of God on my life. Yeah. And I sought to give definition to that by going to a school of evangelism in Europe. But I was exposed to stuff that put my head in a lot of confusion. And really Christianity became a legalistic bondage, and it wasn't working for me, and I returned to Barbados at age 22, and I just rejected the faith, and nobody could get through to me for the next 20 years, so I became an agnostic.
Yeah, quite a contrast. When you came back then to Barbados, was there a period of time where you were void of life and society? What did you get your teeth into? What was it like for you as a young man at that stage?
As I was saying, my head was in a lot of confusion doctrinally, confusion with trying to work through the Christian faith for it to practically work for me. And I perhaps did not get the help that I needed to help. And I made a very bad decision. I made perhaps the worst decision of my life, where I rejected everything outright and just started to live for myself and live on my own, and nobody could get through to me for the next 20 years.
So did you embark on further study? Did you jump into a career, into specific work? What filled your days at that time?
Yeah, well, what filled my days was my dad told me when I got back to Barbados, now listen, boy, you got to wake up, go and find yourself a job.
Yeah.
So I found myself a job, and I started to work in Barbados, and actually I eventually ended up working with him as his internal accountant prior to my coming to Australia. But then I started to party and go out and enjoy my life, and I subsequently met the lady who is now my wife for the last 41 years. Mm-hmm. And in our socializing with a group of other couples every weekend, one couple mentioned that they were coming to live in Australia. So after we had been married for about between 1 and 2 years, we decided to come to Australia as well. We had lived in Barbados. My wife had been exposed to a year in the USA, and I had been exposed to Europe, and we just felt to come and live in Australia, which has now been our home for 40 years.
So where did you arrive, and what did you get involved in from the beginning?
Well, we arrived in Sydney because we decided to take the boat because it was a lovely 3-4 weeks holiday from Barbados through the Panama Canal across to Tahiti. Nice. So after we arrived in Sydney, we made our way progressively across to Perth, and we got to Perth in January-ish, early 75. Mm-hmm. And the first priority after arriving in Perth, staying with our friends for a few weeks, was to find employment for both of us. So both of us were fortunate in that I found work in accountancy very, very quickly, and my wife also found employment with the Sheraton Hotel working in reservations because she had worked in reservations in the Caribbean. Yeah. And we were up and running within a few weeks. We bought a car, got a unit to live in, subsequently had our first home built within the first year. Wow. And quickly settled into Australian way of life.
Congratulations, but what a far cry from, the tropical climate of Trinidad and Jamaica and yachting, and this was WA?
Yeah, Perth in West Australia, that's right. And we had 17 years in all, Karen, in West Australia, 11 and a half in Perth, and 5.5 in a little country town called Denmark, not far from Albany in the southwest.
What was it that you were doing then in the country part of WA?
Well, for the first 11 and a half years in Perth, we were very much into the standard status quo of materialistic living. We had quickly paid off for our first home within about 6 years, and we were succeeding in what we were doing. But this was all within the context of the 20 years of agnosticism. Right. And I had grown up in a home in Barbados with a highly successful father, and I would say there was some rejection of the price you have to pay for white-collar success with work and how it potentially could affect your family. So I was going through a lot of transitions in my mind. We were married for 14 years before we had any kids. And my wife said to me, listen, fellow, I'm getting older. If we're going to have the kids, we got to do something about it pretty soon. So I thought it'd be a good idea to go and live in the country because I thought that might be the insulation to protect children from the ravages of everything that you construe to be negative about city living that non-Christian parents would expose to their children. So I moved from white-collar work to blue-collar work to live in the country in Denmark for about 5.5 years, and I lived a semi-alternate lifestyle on the outskirts of Denmark. So it was a huge transition, and it was really a time of you could say, searching, because I tried Christianity and for me it did not work. So I was looking and seeking.
Keyword seeker at the time, yeah?
That's right. I was into meditation. I was into a bit of New Age. Denmark is very much alternate, semi-alternate society. I was into hanging out with people who were looking in different directions, and I was exposing myself to this stuff. I became a skilled wood turner. I could take a piece of wood and make beautiful table lamps, standing lamps, vases, bowls, all that sort of thing. And I was doing a lot of reading, and really what I was trying to do, Karen, was a rejection of standard culture and just trying to create my own culture with my own values, my own mindset as to how I thought life should be lived.
And grow your own family at the same time.
And grow my own family at the same time. So the kids were born in Denmark. They're 27 and 24 now. So their very early formative years were done in Denmark. So we lived on a 3+ acre block overlooking the coastal plains out to the Great Southern Ocean. It was absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
With giant cherry trees. So it was a good time for reflection and thinking about life and trying to work out what this thing called life was all about.
And were you happy with what you were doing? With what you achieved in that time, in that place?
Well, I would describe it as a journey.
Yeah.
And yes, there would have been a lot of happy moments in the process of that journey, but also there was something or someone who I know now who was missing.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Karen Hunter is chatting with Mike Kinch, who's originally from Barbados in the Caribbean and migrated to Australia in the 1970s. Mike is sharing his spiritual journey from at one point being full on for the Lord to eventually walking away from his faith. We'll hear how he comes back to God when we return.
The Story.